June 23rd, 1944. A scrum of reporters and dignitaries gathered around Franklin D. Roosevelt. With a pen stroke or two from the president, the Servicemen's Readjustment Act became the law of the land. It was better known then as the GI Bill of Rights and better known today as the GI Bill. Conceived and promoted by the American Legion, it provided servicemen and women funding for college or technical training, loans for homes, farms, and businesses, unemployment allowance for up to a year, and funding for veterans' hospitals. It was just a few weeks earlier that Allied forces won a bloody foothold in Europe. Peace was a year away. But the social upheaval that followed World War I demobilization wasn't forgotten, and it would not be repeated. Once it was over there, Europe lay in ruins. Britain, though victorious in war, was knocked from its perch as a dominant world power. Over here, a new era was about to begin, marked by the baby boom, boundless opportunity, newfangled suburbs, and the rise of the middle class. And this dynamic American story was about to transform the role of a key cast member. I'm Bud Bacone. Hang on to your GI benefits, and I'll show you how this remarkable era shaped the role of dogs in America and how those dogs have helped shape us ever since.
What is a dog? How much is a dog worth?
The sport of dogs is one of the cleanest and best regulated of all the organized sports.
I am 50% setter, Irish setter.
Today, there is no question of the dog's place in society.
Isn't that so, Lassie?
Down and Back. Stories from the AKC archives.
This is the show for you.
With Bud Bacone.
This pup is more than a pal.
With the GI Bill less than a year old, the human cost of the World War was yet to be tallied.
Entering the final phase of victory over Hitler's Nazis, Yank armies swarm across Western Germany, bringing devastation to cities of the Reich.
As in any such catastrophe, the collateral damage included canines. Across Europe, entire breeds were all but wiped out, and so it goes throughout history. The fortunes of canines rise and fall with those of humans. Stateside, with family members tending the home front with uncertainty and rationing, the relative minutiae of dog ownership had taken a backseat to the war effort. Just as it had during the dozen years of depression dating back to the Wall Street crash of 1929. For struggling families, owning a dog was a luxury, and luxuries had all but evaporated. By 1945, the clouds finally showed signs of parting.
This is your victory.
Call it a whiplash, a good kind of whiplash, if there is such a thing. After a generation of depression and war, there was new hope. And with the war over, servicemen and women were coming home. Capitalism and consumerism were back, baby.
Another cup of Maxwell House coffee, George?
Sure. Pour me a cup, Gracie.
To keep your dog in top condition, get your pet complete nutrition. Feed them sturdy, make them sturdy, happy, friendly, petty bird.
Brill green, a little dabble do ya.
Banker Hocking, the most famous name in glass.
Tomorrow clouding to get you. Yeah.
War and devastation had sapped the economic life out of Europe. America was poised to fill the vacuum. In the first 12 years following the war, America's gross national product would double. Babies boomed. And in this newfound growth and wealth, the rise in dog ownership was palpable. Enough so that the National Geographic Society suggested the U.S. government conduct a dog census. They were refused. But it could have been interesting.
How many people live here? Okay. And how many dogs? Very good. And one last question. Who's a good dog? Oh, no, who's a good dog? Oh, look at the dog. Oh, who's a good dog?
One bellwether was the surge in the registration of purebred dogs. That number more than doubled between 1946 and 1958. Nationwide, estimates range from 15 to 26 million canines in America's 43 million households. And millions of those canines, like their humans, were changing their address.
Hey there, USA, see the Chevrolet. Spectacular's the word that fits it best.
With the GI Bill, a new wave of good old U.S. capitalism called for massive new infrastructure. So began the golden age of suburbs and a new idealized self-portrait of the rising middle class. Mom, dad, brother and sister, and their beloved family dog.
So take old Pat's advice, check Chevy's low, low price, spectacular new Chevrolet. There was a trailer by the name of...
Imagery that wouldn't be spoiled by the Red Menace and the threat of thermonuclear devastation. Forget about it, we got a flat of dog food in the fallout shelter.
Duck and cover, duck and cover.
So which breed was most popular in this wacky post-war era? Spoiler alert, in the 50s it was not the Cocker Spaniel, who had topped the list for a decade and a half. The 50s would be the decade of the Beagle, whose peak of popularity might be traced back to a cold February day before the war. If you happen to flip through the comic section of your paper on February 22nd, 1937, you would have seen this small item in the Ripley's Believe It or Not panel, showing an illustration of a dark and white canine. The text reads, "A hunting dog that eats pins, tacks, screws, and razor blades is owned by C.F. Schulz, St. Paul, Minnesota." Beside the illustration was the credit, "Drawn by Sparky." CF was Minneapolis barber Carl Friedrich Schulz. Sparky was the nickname of his 14-year-old son, Charles Monroe Schulz, creator of Charlie Brown and Peanuts. Can't you just feel the whole Paul Harvey rest of the story vibe taking over?
Hey, pal. That'll be 2 cents.
I'll see if I still carry change. Whoops.
Wait a minute. Don't I know you from somewhere?
To the archives. According to Peanuts legend, Charles Schulz drew inspiration from his childhood dog Spike, believed to be a pointer beagle mix. Schulz once recalled that he believed the dog could understand 50 words. Fast forward now to autumn 1952. Schulz launched Peanuts in a handful of newspapers and introduced readers to Snoopy, as unbeagle-like a beagle ever to fly a Sopwith camel. Before long, Peanuts and Snoopy would amass a worldwide audience of more than 355 million readers. Not so long ago, we featured a breed biography of the Beagle, so for now, how about a recap? Neither World War I flying aces, nor hockey players, nor, so far as we know, published authors, the Beagle is a wonderful hunting companion, a breed that predates the arrival of the Roman legions in England. They've been adored by countless generations of fans, including Queen Elizabeth I to Lyndon Johnson. The Beagle's compact, aw shucks good looks made it a go-to favorite of Norman Rockwell, whose iconic art helped brand 20th century American culture. The breed was recognized in 1885 when the American Kennel Club was itself just a pup. And it remains the only breed to crack the list of top 10 most popular breeds in every decade since AKC's founding. So it was 1952, the year Schulz introduced Snoopy, that the Beagle took the #1 spot among popular breeds. This Beagle-mania would continue through the decade. In time, AKC would grant Snoopy honorary registration Beagle-1, waiving its long-standing rule that registered canines be, real. Like the suburbs, television existed in the 1920s, but it would hit its stride in the 1950s, and coinciding with the rise in dog ownership, it was the small screen, maybe just 8 inches in the early days, that would drive breed popularity. Some breeds in those early TV days were known from their life on the big screen. A TV version of Dashiell Hammett's The Thin Man reintroduced the nation to the wire fox terrier, Asta. We've talked in the past about the decades-long TV run of beloved rough collie Lassie and of owner-handler Rudd Weatherwax, who was given the TV rights by MGM Studios in lieu of outstanding fees owed. TV afforded a second life to the German Shepherd dog Rin Tin Tin, whose character had made his debut in silent films 3 decades earlier.
Private Rin Tin Tin, they are the Army's pride and joy.
In 1951, Roy Rogers and Dale Evans galloped from big to small screen, this time with a canine pal in the cast.
The Roy Rogers Show, starring Roy Rogers, King of the Cowboys, Trigger, his golden palomino, and Dale Evans, Queen of the West, with Pat Brady, his comical sidekick, and Roy's wonder dog, Bullet.
Bullet was Roy Rogers' family pet, also a German Shepherd dog, conscripted by Roy and Dale Evans into the family business. Registered with AKC as Bullet von Berge, his remains, like those of Roy's horse Trigger, were preserved and mounted. In 2010, Christie's auctioned off Bullet's remains for a cool $35,000. Not that Bullet didn't make some respectable coin in his lifetime, serving as a TV spokesdog.
Well, look who's here, Roy Rogers' wonder dog, Bullet. And where does he get all that bounding energy, that sturdy good health? Why, Gaines homogenized meal.
Americans looked for themselves in early TV families, and those families, more often than not, included a dog. There were family or neighbor dogs in Dennis the Menace and Blondie. Topper kept a St. Bernard. The poodle Coco appeared in the Donna Reed Show. Many served double duty as heroes and as comic relief. And at least one Cocker Spaniel played a leading role in American political theater.
We got a message from the Union Station in Baltimore saying they had a package for us. We went down to get it. You know what it was? It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog in a crate that he'd sent all the way from Texas. Black and white, spotted. And our little girl, Tricia, the 6-year-old, named it Checkers. And you know, the kids, like all kids, love the dog. And I just want to say this right now, that regardless of what they say about it, we're going to keep it.
Suburbia, the post-war boom, the rise of the family dog. For America's dog food industry, the best of times weren't all good. A decade earlier, when demand was more modest, canned dog food had a 90% share of the market. With the war, metals were diverted to the war effort, causing a scramble to create dry dog foods. Now, after the war, tins were available once more, but Americans started asking what was in them, and many didn't care for the answer. Much of those early tins of dog food were comprised of horse meat. Practical, yes, but with a sky-high psychological barrier. To American families, it wouldn't do to have Bullet eat Trigger. That was a deal-breaker. Dry dog foods, meanwhile, faced their own challenge. The idea wasn't new. Dog biscuits had been around since the 1860s, when a lightning rod salesman named James Spratt, we're not making this up, was inspired by sailors' hardtack and used a similar technique to make the first dog biscuits. By the 50s, consumers complained that their dogs weren't happy with the texture and digestibility of the dry fare. That's when cereal manufacturers said the secret word: extrusion. Pet food adopted a method developed for breakfast cereals. It begins with a wet and dry ingredients forming a sort of dough. That concoction is fed into a machine called an expander. Once there, it's steam cooked under extreme pressure at high temperatures. At that point, it's extruded or pushed through a die-cut machine where it finds its final form as kibble. Extrusion begat kibble that satisfied the concerns of dogs and dog owners and whose shelf life solved problems for manufacturers. With canine menu issues resolved, there remained a huge post-war appetite for all things dog, and popular media were happy to oblige. There was just one missing ingredient. America was ready for a real-life canine superstar, and it would come from an unconventional direction.
You're listening to Down and Back, stories from the AKC archives.
Ladies and gentlemen, your Mercury dealer and your Lincoln dealer present the Ed Sullivan Show, America's #1 TV variety show, starring Ed Sullivan, nationally syndicated columnist of the New York Daily News.
The 50s introduced dog sports to a whole new mass audience, aided by the made-for-television appeal of the Westminster Dog Show. Its canines appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, appointment television in its time. Champion dogs graced the cover of top magazines. On July 4th, 1955, the cover of Sports Illustrated, launched just the year before, features champion Kipak's Fear Not, a.k.a. Jock, a bulldog from California. He was by no means the last Westminster champion to grace this cover.
That's going to be a quarter. Listen, do you just want to start a tab?
Yet it was one of Jock's fellow Californians who would become the true 1950s sensation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, on what must be adjudged a glorious day here in New York. The Dumont Television Network sincerely hopes that you're able to be spending this Sunday in the traditional manner of rest and relaxation.
On a fine spring day in 1953, viewers of the Dumont Network were treated to the 9th annual specialty show of the American Boxer Club. It's possible most viewers were new to the sport. It's certain that host Walter Rainey was.
About which I'm going to be very quick to say that I know very little. I'm Walter Rainey, by the way, and
happily, co-host Carl Wood knew the sport and read the crowd's reaction to the star of the show.
In case you haven't guessed it already, is our third top dog, champion Bangaway of Syracuse, last year's garden winner.
A beautiful dog.
Bangaway now boasts some 55 best in show all-breed triumphs and has topped a half a dozen specialties.
It looks sculptured.
He was the great fawn and white boxer, Bangaway of Sierra Crest, owned by a couple named Harris, Sierra being Harris spelled backwards. Though just 24 inches high at the shoulders, Bangaway was larger than life. To borrow a phrase, if he hadn't existed, somebody would have invented him. Just get a load of his CV. Bangaway was the first dog to top 100 Best in Show titles. He would win 121 in all. Somehow, that doesn't do him justice. Bangaway loved the spotlight, and he carried truckloads of canine charisma, an attribute not lost on the general public. Hence his appearance on TV, in ads, in Look, Life, Esquire, Time, and yes, Sports Illustrated. Bangaway, a Californian, put the West in Westminster, the first dog from west of the Mississippi to win the Best in Show there, a nod to the era when air travel, network TV, and new interstate highways helped shrink distances. While Bangaway is a key to the development of the modern boxer, this feels like the time to get to know the breed itself. Professor? Loyalty, affection, intelligence. Check. Work ethic, good looks. Check and check. Boxers of the whole doggy package. The boxer can be traced back as far as 2500 BC to the war dogs of the Assyrian Empire. It's believed the boxer might have been bred down by German dog fanciers from a larger, heavier breed called the Benenbeißer, or bull-biter. Judiciously crossed with a smaller Mastiff-type English breed, the big game hunter found a new lease on life as a sleeker, more elegant dog. Boxers have held many jobs: cattle dog, police dog. They served in both world wars. They've been a watchdog, worked in security, and as guide dogs. Bright and alert, sometimes silly, but always courageous, the boxer has long been one of America's most popular breeds. The dark brown eyes and wrinkled forehead give the face an alert, curious look. The coat can be fawn or brindle with white markings. Upbeat and graceful, boxers move like the athletes they are named for. They take the jobs of watchdog and family guardian seriously and will meet threats fearlessly. As for Bangaway, he has a backstory of his own. With the fascist rise in the 1930s, Nazis took a great interest in German-bred dogs, seizing kennels, in particular those belonging to Jewish breeders, and helped themselves to thousands of dogs, effectively destroying some of the oldest and most distinguished bloodlines. Thousands of dogs would die on the front lines. After the war, the Soviets parceled off eastern Germany, looting kennels for, in air quotes, the common good, with many breeders forced into servitude and hard labor. Among their targets was Marienhof kennels, where, miraculously, the line of boxers had been carefully preserved. Marienhof was dismantled by the Soviets, but not before a wealthy Milwaukee couple named Wagner were able to spirit away a prize boxer named Dorian. Had Dorian not survived, had courageous German breeders not found a way to protect their kennels, the world would never have known Bangaway, whose line in turn would produce champions and define the boxer that Americans love today. By the time Bangaway won Best in Show at Westminster in 1951, he was a bona fide celebrity and American media darling. But, to borrow a metaphor from the decade that followed, for every Beatles, there's a Rolling Stones, an arch rival lurking nearby. In 1952, that rival was Storm, a magnificent Doberman pinscher who also racked up an impressive boatload of wins. Storm's owner, Connecticut's Len Carey, was an ad man, said to have been one of the inspirations for Don Draper of Mad Men, minus the heavy drinking and womanizing. Carey would at one point hire his wife and Storm to appear in ads for Lucky Strike. At that year's Westminster, the crowd was electrified as the judge, Joseph Sims, examined the Best in Show lineup. As Life magazine reported, Storm stood motionless for a full 13 minutes.
As Storm held his pose, few human beings, let alone dogs, can stand still for 13 minutes. The eyes of one onlooker after another swung to him and remained fixed, until at last 12,000 people were staring breathlessly at him. Finally, Sims approached him, and at that instant, Storm turned his head, peered puckishly up at the judge, then resumed the pose. The crowd gave one prolonged roar and kept on roaring until Sims signaled that Storm had won the show.
As if to add an exclamation mark, Storm won Best in Show again a year later, an incredible and made-for-television feat that sealed his place among the all-time greats. Still, there was glory enough for all. For dogs, for dog sports, for 50s pop culture and mass media, the Bangaway-Storm rivalry was a classic win-win. In 1956, Bangaway was retired, his legend written with little left to win and nothing left to prove. That year, he sat at the dais in New York's Savoy Plaza Hotel at a retirement dinner held in his honor. And to this day, it remains a point of great pride for anyone to say their boxer's lineage goes back to Bangaway. In the dog world, as in every aspect of life, there was an everything everywhere all at once energy to those post-war years. As Europe lay in rubble, America rose to global preeminence, its idealized self-portrait reflected and refined through its own mass media. A decade later, that self-portrait would be sorely tested, but one new immutable constant was the family dog. If canines weren't always part of America's self-portrait before, they were now and forevermore. Dogs have always been part of the American story, but ever since those hectic days of the post-war boom, the American story could not be told without them.
Down and Back, stories from the AKC archives. Visit akc.org to learn everything you could ever want to know about responsible dog ownership. Follow AKC on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at American Kennel Club. On X, at AKC Dog Lovers. And tell us what you thought of the show. If you're new to the show, subscribe with your favorite podcast provider to catch up on all of our past episodes. Founded in 1884, the not-for-profit AKC is the recognized and trusted expert in breed, health, and training information for all dogs. We actively advocate for responsible dog ownership and are dedicated to advancing dog sports. We actively advocate for responsible dog ownership and are dedicated to advancing dog sports. Excuse me. Research for Down and Back is provided by the AKC Library and Archives, the only national repository dedicated to the sport and enjoyment of the purebred dog. Learn more about the collections at akc.org/library.